Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. This is Joe, the bearded historian. He'll tell you an interesting story. Be careful of his soldiers, they can be brats. This is Angel, she's an entity. She'll cause chaos and plant her hands at you. This is Sue, she likes spirits, not the alcohol. She's the reason this channel exists. This is David, he likes fire trucks. He's here occasionally. Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. We preserve his story. Welcome to Wednesday. We're halfway through June. If you haven't seen How to Train a Dragon, it's a remake, a live version that's worth watching. They follow the cartoon almost verbatim. Really awesome. Can't wait to see it again. Details, mostly because that impacted some of the pictures that I chose today. Before all that, we've got a race. I chose a normal running race because today's topic is baseball. Are you ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I'll support you. This shout out is for our friends. Let's see who it is today. Are you ready? Alright, there's She Stole. There's Mountain Inspiration. Stevie and Tina. There's my Linda. There's Cobble. Principal, there's Popcorn, there's Tammy, Carnival, Mine Fork, Giraffe, Mark, Crazy Train, Brick Girls, Glitter, Dirt Digger, Steph, Peach, Frugal, Jacob, Dimmy, Kale, Travis, DG, Trip, Tuber. Is it going to be Tuber? I think it's Tuber today. It is Tuber. Alright, Mr. Kevin, hold on. Alright, this is Mr. Tuber, Mr. Kevin. If you're not familiar with Tuber, what he does is Connecty. He does lives every few days for about 3-ish hours. And and people chat and connect. And it's wonderful. He's fun, very supportive. One of the few that I pay, to have a subscription to. So check out Mr. Kevin. And, oh, come on, my focus is terrible. Because definitely a good way to grow. Great supporter. Great community. So check him out. Like, share, comment. Have a good day. In that case, lead on. No, that's it.
Play ball.
Tell you to play a ball would work.
Play ball.
All right, on you go.
All right. Well, when my wifey was looking at ideas for today, one item that came across the teletype that struck me as kind of interesting. It says the first baseball game to use the rules we play by today dated onto the June 19th. And the interesting part of it is that it involved North America here in 1845, if I remember right. Let me just double check. And the thing that was interesting about it wasn't as much as the fact that the game itself that was played, it was who was officiating. And what wound up happening is that the Knickerbocker rules was the basis evolution that they had to the current rules is pretty well documented. It's found in a lot of places. Most significant differences was that overhand pitching was illegal, interestingly enough. Strikes only counted if the batter swung and missed. Balls were not counted at all. A batter caught on the first bounce was an out, and the game was played to 21 aces or runs rather than a set number of innings. It is noteworthy that the Knickerbocker rules do not cover a number of basic elements of the game. For example, there is no mention of the positions or the number of players on the side. So you could have 30 guys on one side. Kind of crazy. In all likelihood, all of these matters, except for the first, were considered so intrinsic to baseball that by the time they were assumed, a number of players on the side, however, remained a matter of debate among clubs until it was fixed at 9 in 1857. The Knickerbockers arguing unsuccessfully for 7-man teams. Well, June 3rd, 1953, Congress officially credited Cartwright with inventing the modern game of baseball. He had already been a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame, being inducted in 1938 for various other contributions to the game. However, the role Cartwright himself is the game's invention has been disputed. According to Major League Baseball's official historian John Thorne, Cartwright's plaque in the Baseball Hall of Fame declares he set the bases at 90 feet apart and established 9 innings in a game and 9 players as a team. He did none of these things, and every other word of substance on that plaque is false.
Oh dear.
Ouch.
That's not good.
No.
We're all starting out with a lie.
Just a little
oh dear.
Little outside. His authorship may have been exaggerated in a modern attempt to identify a single inventor of the game, and heavily advanced by a relentless public relations campaign by his grandson. Sounds kind of like the things that they used to say for Martha Washington, Abraham Lincoln, you know, great tall tales, not very well founded in history.
Yeah, so you were supposed to tell the truth?
Oh, heaven forbid. Why would they want to do that?
Damn it.
Now, the other thing that was kind of interesting off of this was that, you know, from 1945 to 1953, you know, that's a lot of time to take an experiment with these rules. And that there was also an ongoing debate regarding a fellow named Abner Doubleday. Now, there was a commission that was done, concluded that Abner Doubleday had invented baseball in Cooperstown, New York, in 1839. That was the place where the Hall of Fame is located. Invented the word baseball, designed the diamond, indicated fielders' positions, and writ the rules. No written records in the decade between 1839 and 1849 have ever been found to corroborate these claims, nor could Doubleday be interviewed. Well, he died in 1893.
There are no ghost whisperers?
No, sadly. Now, the principal source for the story was one letter from an elderly Abner Graves, who was a 5-year-old resident at Cooperstown in 1839. Graves never mentioned a diamond, positions, or the writing of the rules. What's more, his reliability as a witness was challenged because he spent the final days in an asylum for the criminally insane.
Well, why would they question them?
Oh, who knows?
He seems like such a reliable witness.
Exactly. So,
considering he was 5 at the time and then insane later in life.
Yeah. And of course, Doubleday wasn't in Cooperstown in 1839 and may never have visited the town. He was
dear.
enrolled at West Point at the time, and there was no record of him having any leave time. Now, Mills, who the commission was named after, was a lifelong friend of Doubleday. Never heard of him mention baseball, nor was there any mention of the game in Doubleday's autobiography.
Oh, well, maybe he left it out.
Yeah. Doubleday was bookish and sedentary with no observable interest in athletics of any sort. It's like, well, he's got a really cool name. Let's name something after him. Now, versions of baseball's rules and descriptions of similar games have been found in publications significantly predate this alleged invention in 1839. Now, going back, it was interesting when I was digging up the history off of this, because it talks about the origins of baseball, the games, either baseball or something like it. Where did they get the litmus test for this? Now, games with using other modern bat, ball, and running games. There's a thing called stool ball, cricket, rounders. These are full games that came out of early Britain, Ireland, and continental Europe, such as France or Germany. And early forms of baseball had a number of names, including baseball, goal ball, round ball, fetch catch, stool ball, and simply base. At least one version of the game, teams pitched to themselves, runners went around the bases in the opposite direction of today's game, much like in Nordic brand ball,
Interesting.
And, yeah, players could just be put out by being hit with the ball.
Oh, no.
I'm not going to throw to first. I'm going to nail that sucker. Now, just like now, in some versions, the batter was called out after 3 strikes. So there's, pretty much the first origin. Although much isn't clear, as one would expect from children's games of long ago, this much is known. By the mid-18th century, a game had appeared in the south of England which involved striking a pitched ball and then running a circuit of bases. Rounders is referenced in 1744 in the children's book, A Little Pretty Pocketbook, where it was called baseball. Now, English colonists took the game to North America with their other pastimes, and in the early 1800s, variants were being played on both sides of the ocean under many varieties. However, the game was significantly altered by an amateur men's ball club in and around New York City at the mid-19th century, and this heavily revised sport that became the modern baseball. Now, again, a number of folk games in early Britain and continental Europe with characteristics can be seen in modern baseball. Again, cricket, rounders, many of these games involved a ball that was thrown at a target while an opposing player defended the target by attempting to hit the ball away. If the batter successfully hit the ball, he could attempt to score points by running between bases, while fielders attempt to catch or retrieve the ball and put the runner out. Folks games of similar time, place, and culture, resulting in similar yet varying forms. These games often had no standard documented rules and instead were played according to historical customs. What worked in Paris probably didn't work in London.
What? Why not?
They didn't speak the same language.
That's beside the point.
Early folk games were associated with earlier religious ceremonies and worship rituals, and these games became discouraged and even altogether prohibited by subsequent governing states and religious authorities. How dare you play on Sunday? Now, aside from obvious differences in terminology, the games differed in the equipment used: ball, bat, club, target, which were usually just whatever was available. Stickball. That one was played up in North Rapid a bit. Now, aside from the obvious differences, the way the ball was thrown, the method of scoring, and the method of making outs, the layout of the field, and the number of players involved. Very broadly speaking, these games can be roughly divided into forms of long ball, where the batter ran out to a single point on the line or back, as in cricket, and round ball, where there was a circuit of multiple bases. There are also games like stool ball, trap ball, which involve no running at all.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Home run derby, yeah. Now, there was a game in Romania called Oina, a form of long ball similar in many ways to lapta. The name Oina is originally Hoina, which is derived from a Cuman word, Oyan game, a cognate of Turkish Oyan, and was oldest direct mention comes from 1364.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In 1899, Spiro Harat, a minister of education, decided that Oina was to be played in schools and physical education classes. He organized the first annual Oina competitions. The Romanian Oina Federation was founded in 1932, was reactivated at the beginning of the 1950s after a brief period when it was dissolved.
Okay.
Today, there's 2 of these federations, one in Bucharest and the other in Trano, Moldova. Now, stool ball, which sounds really bad like a bathroom joke.
Right.
In 1802, a book titled The Sports and Pastimes of the Peoples of England, Joseph Strutt claimed to have shown that baseball-like games could be traced back to the 14th century, in particular an English game called stool ball. The earliest known reference to stool ball is a 1330 poem by William Paglia, who recommended to priests that the game be forbidden within churchyards. Priests didn't like games very much. I don't know
Apparently
why.
not. How
In
dare you?
stool ball, one player throws the ball at a target while another player defends the target. Almost sounds like a baseball hockey game.
Right?
Originally, the target was defended with a bare hand. Later, a bat of some kind was used. A modern stool ball, a bat like a very heavy table tennis pad, was used. Staub ball and stow ball were regional games similar to stool ball. What the target originally was in stool ball was not certain. It was possibly a tree stump, since staub and stow mean stump in some local dialects. Stow could also refer to a type of frame used in mining. It is notable that in cricket to this day, the uprights of the wicket are sometimes called stumps. Of course, the target could well have been whatever was convenient, perhaps even a gravestone.
Well then.
I had Uncle Mike again. Anyway, hence Pagula's objection to the churchyard play. A 17th century book on games specifies a stool. Now, according to one legend, milkmaids played stool ball while waiting for their husbands to return from the field.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Another theory is that stool ball developed as a game played after attending church services, in which case the target was probably a church stool. An 18th century poem depicts the men and women playing together, with the women using their aprons to catch the batted balls, and it and other references associated the game with the Easter season.
Interesting.
Yeah. There were several versions of stool ball. In the earliest versions, the object was primarily to defend the stool. Successfully defending the stool counted for 1 point, and the batter was out if the ball hit the stool. There is no running involved. Another version of stool ball involved running between two stools, and scoring was similar to scoring in cricket. And perhaps yet another version, there were several stools, and the points were scored by running around them as in baseball. Well, when the Englishmen came to America, they brought stool ball with them. William Bradford, in his diary on Christmas Day, 1621, noted, with disapproval, how the men of Plymouth were frolicking in the street, at play openly, some pitching be bare, some at stool ball, and such like sport. Because the different versions of stool ball, because it was played not only in England but also colonial America, stool ball is considered by many to be the common ancestor of cricket, baseball, and rounders. Now, tut ball, or bisball, was a similar to both stool ball and rounders. The corners of the infield were marked by tuts, sods, or pieces of brick that marked the bases rather than stools, and the batter generally hit with their hand. That looked like handball. Another early folk game was dog and cat, or cat and dog, which probably originated in Scotland. In cat and dog, an oblong piece of wood called a cat is thrown in a hole in the ground while another player defends the hole with a stick. In some cases, there were only 2 holes, and after hitting the cat, the batter would run between them while fielders would try to get the runner out by putting the cat in the hole before the runner got to it. Dog and cat thus resembled cricket. Yeah. Hornbillets, this game, otherwise unknown, was described in Francis Willoughby's Book of Games, circa 1670, which included rules for over 130 pastimes, including stool ball and stow ball. It is significant that it involved both a bat and base running, though it was played with a wooden cat rather than a ball, and the multiple bases were holes in the ground. Good way to twist an ankle.
Right?
The batter reached safety by putting the end of the bat into the hole before the fielders could put the cat in it. This has echoes of the cricket's manner of scoring runs by touching the bat to the ground across the crease before the fielders can hit the nearby wicket with the ball. Trap ball, played in England since the 14th century. A ball was thrown in the air to be hit by the batsman and fielded. In some variants, a member of the field team threw the ball in the air, and some, the batter tossed it himself as in fungo. In others, the batsman caused the ball to be tossed in the air by a simple lever mechanism. Versions of this, called bat and trap and nur and spell, are still played in some English pubs. In trap ball, there's no running. Instead, the fielders attempted to throw the ball back to within a certain distance of the batter's station. Trap ball might be the origin of the concepts of foul lines. In some variants, the ball had to be hit between 2 posts to count. A related game was tip cat. In this one, the cat was an oblong piece of wood, like a dog and cat. It tapered toward each end, rather like a rugby ball or an American football, so that striking one end would flip it into the air, much like the trap in trap ball, so that it could be struck with a stick or a bat. Base, an Old English game called base or prisoner's base, was described by George Ewing at Valley Forge, and apparently not much like baseball.
Oops.
There were no bat, no ball involved. The game was more like a fancy game of tag, although it did share the concept of places for safety, bases, with baseball. Now, cricket, prior to 1650, is something of a mystery. The game is believed to have been similar to cricket developed in the 13th century, There was a game called Krieg and another game called Hand In and Handout, Hands In or Handout, in which was made illegal by the King Edward IV in 1477.
Something tells me he lost.
Badly. Consider the game childish and a distraction.
Aren't most games?
Terribly. And a distraction from the compulsory archery practice.
Oh dear.
We'd rather shoot people with arrows than have them play cricket. Now, reference to a game actually called cricket appeared around 1550. It is believed the word cricket is based either on the word crick, meaning a crooked stick, cognate with the English crook. Nearby forms of cricket used the curved bat, somewhat like a hockey stick, or a Middle Dutch phrase for hockey, met knee, or cricket sin, with the stick chase. Or on the Flemish word kriekstoel, which refers to a stool upon which one kneels in church, and which the early long low wicket resembled. The word etymology related to the French croquet, early forms of which were also played with a curved stick rather than a mallet. Now, the earliest known mention of baseball as a children's game dates to the same year, 1744, in which the artillery ground laws formalized the rules of what was already a first-class professional sport sponsored by nobility, upon which vast wagers were laid. English colonists would play cricket along with other games from home, as mentioned in many times in the 18th century American sources. As an organized sport, the Toronto Cricket Club was established by that city in 1827, and the St. George's Cricket Club was founded in 1838 in New York City. Membership was restricted to British-born men. Now, teams from the two clubs would face off in international cricket rules games in 1844, which was won by Toronto by 23 runs. Many of the early New York club baseball players were also cricketers, and the earliest recorded interclub baseball game was played on the Union Star cricket grounds in Brooklyn. Now, the British game most similar to baseball, and most mentioned as its ancestor or nearest relation, is rounders. Like baseball, the object is to strike a pitch ball with a bat and then run a circuit of 4 bases to score. The batter must strike at a good ball and run in an anti-clockwise direction around first, second, and third base and home to the fourth, though they may stay at any of the first 3. The batter is out if the ball is caught, the base is which the running is touched with the ball, or if while running they are touched with the ball by the fielder. 9 players constitute a team, with the fielding side consisting of the bowler, a backstop or catcher, a player in each of the 4 bases, and the 3 deep fielders. Now, popular among British and Irish school children, especially among girls, as of 2015, rounders is played by 7 million children in the UK.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of kids.
That is a lot of kids.
Now, in 1828, William Clark of London published the 2nd edition of the Boy's Own Book, which included the rules of rounders, the fact the earliest known use of that name, and the first printed description of a bat and ball base running game played on a diamond. The following year, the book was published in Boston, Massachusetts. The exact same rules were reprinted verbatim in Robin Carver's The Book of Sports in Boston, 1834, except where it was headlined not as rounders, but base or goal ball. Now, a unique sport for the British, known as British baseball, is still played in parts of Wales and England. Although confined mainly to the cities Cardiff, Newport, and Liverpool, the sport boasts an annual international game which represents teams from the 2 countries. British baseball, however, is much more akin to rounders and was in fact called until 1892, and represents rounders variants somewhat hybridized by the influence of 19th century American touring teams. It is in fact the last survival in Great Britain as the once widespread adult club rounders. Now, baseball, back to the original sport. According to many sources, the earliest appearance of the word dates from 1700, when Anglican Bishop Thomas Wilson expressed his disapproval of the Morris dancing, cudgel playing, baseball, and cricket occurring on Sundays. However, David Block, in Baseball Before We Knew It, in 2005, reports that the original source has stool ball as baseball Block also reports the reference appears to date to 1672 rather than 1700. The 1744 book, John Newbery called a pretty little pocketbook, includes a woodcut of a game similar to a three-base stool ball or rounders and a rhyme entitled baseball. This was the first known instance of the word baseball in print. John Thorne, Major League Baseball's official historian, speculates the game depicted may have involved hitting the ball with a bare hand, as in punch ball, and that hitting with a bat may not have become established until later in the century. In 1755, a book entitled The Card by John Kindle, in Volume 1 on page 9 mentions baseball. The younger part of the family, perceiving Papa not inclined to enlarge upon the matter, retired to an interrupted party at baseball, an infant game which, as it advances into teens, improves into fives. Although a pretty little pocketbook first appeared 11 years earlier, no copies of the first or early editions have surfaced to date, only the 10th and later editions from 1760 forward. Therefore, the card was the oldest surviving reference to baseball until the Bray Diary was discovered in 2008. Now, the earliest recorded game of baseball involves none other than the family of the Prince of Wales playing indoors in London in 1748 in November. The Prince is reported as playing baseball again September 1749 in Walton-on-Thames, Surrey, against Lord Middlesex. The English lawyer William Ray wrote in his diary that he had played a game of baseball on Easter Monday, 1755, in Guildford, also in Surrey. The word baseball first appeared in the dictionary in 1768 in a general dictionary of the English language compiled by the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica.
Interesting.
The first year they published that, with an unhelpful description. A rural game in which the person striking the ball must run to his base or goal.
I mean, that's not wrong.
Well,
Not exactly detailed, but it's not wrong.
right. Now, by 1796, the rules of this English game were well enough established to earn a mention in German Johann Christoph Friedrich Gunsmith's book on the popular pastimes. In it, he described Ball mit Fleischstaden, ball with safe places, or English baseball, as a contest between two teams in which the batter has 3 attempts to hit the ball while at the home plate. Only 1 out was required to retire a side. Gunsmith included a diagram of the field which is very similar to that of a town ball. Notably, Gunsmith is the earliest author to explicitly mention the use of a bat, although in this case it's a flat wooden paddle about 18 inches long, swung one-handed. Whee! Woo! Now, the French book, Les Jeux des Jeunes Garçons, is the second known book to contain printed rules for batting, base, and running game. Printed in Paris in 1810, lays out the rules for La Balle Espionnelle, or Poison Ball, great name, in which there are 2 teams of 8 to 10 players, 4 bases, 1 called home, a pitcher, a batter, soaking, and fly ball outs. However, the ball apparently was struck by the hand. Another version of handball, apparently.
Interesting.
Another interesting early print reference is Jane Austen's novel, Northanger Abbey, originally written in 1798 and 1799. In the first chapter, the young English heroine Catherine Morland is described as preferring cricket, baseball, riding on horseback, and running about the country to books. David Block speculates that this version of baseball was also played without a bat. About the same time, Austen's cousin, Cassandra Cook, mentioned baseball in her novel Battle Ridge. And in 1820, the village sketch Jake Hatch, author Mary Russell Mitford wrote, "There comes the sunburnt gypsy of 6, beginning to grow tall and thin and to find cares of the world gathering about her, with a pitcher in one hand, a mop in the other, an old straw bonnet of ambiguous shape, half siding in her tangled hair, a tattered stuffed petticoat, once green, hanging below the equally tattered cotton frock, once purple, her longing eyes fixed on a game of baseball at the corner of the green till she reaches the cottage door, flings down the mop and pitcher, and darts off to her companions, quite regardless of the storm of scolding which her mother follows her with runaway steps.
Someone's going to go play baseball.
Oh, why not?
And in 1828, William Clark of London published the second edition of the boy's own book, which included the earliest known mention of the game called Rounders, and contains under the heading the first printed description in English of a bat and ball base running game played on a diamond. The following year, a book was published in Boston, Massachusetts, with similar rules, were published in Boston the Book of Sports, written by Robin Carver in 1834. Now, except Carver calling the game base or goal ball, Clark's Rounders description would be reprinted many times on both sides of the Atlantic in the ensuing decades under various names. Now, charting this evolution that became modern baseball is difficult before 1845. Now, the Knickerbocker rules would describe the game that had been played for some time, but for how long is uncertain. There were once two camps. One, mostly English, asserted that baseball evolved from the game of English origin, possibly Rounders. The other, almost entirely American, said that baseball was an American invention, perhaps derived from the game of one-old cat. Apparently, they saw their possessions as mutually exclusive. Some had points seen more national loyalty than evidence. Americans tended to reject any suggestion that baseball evolved from an English game, while some English observers concluded that baseball was little more than their Rounders without the round. One English author went so far as to declare that the Knickerbocker Club comprised English expatriates who introduced their game to America for the first time in 1845. Again, that Mills Commission at the other extreme created the official and entirely fictional all-American version, attributing the game's invention to Abner Doubleday in 1839 at Cooperstown. Now, both are entirely wrong, since this much is clear. Baseball, or a game called baseball, had been played in America for many years by then. The earliest explicit reference to it in America was in March of 1786 in the diary of a student at Princeton, John Reyes Smith. There's a possible reference to a generation older from Harvard, describing a campus battery in 1760. Sidney Willard wrote, "Besides eatables, everything necessary for the student is there sold, and articles used at the playground, such as bats, balls, etc. Here it was that we wrestled and ran, played at quoits and cricket, at various games of bat and ball." In 1791, a bylaw in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, banned the playing of any game of wicket, cricket, baseball, bat ball, football, cats, fives, and any other game played with ball within 80 yards of the town meeting house
Oh dear.
to prevent damage to the windows.
And they were really bad at aiming, weren't they?
Apparently.
Worcester, Massachusetts even outlawed playing baseball in the streets in 1816. Now, there were other mentions of baseball during the early 19th century. An advertisement at the Kensington House and New York Evening Post dated June 6, 1921, that the grounds of the Kensington House are spacious and well adapted to the playing noble games of cricket, base, trap ball, quoits, and other amusements, and all of apparatus necessary for the above games will be furnished to the clubs and parties. In April 25, 1823, edition of the New York National Advocates included this: "I was last Saturday much pleased at witnessing the company of active young men playing the manly and athletic game of baseball at the retreat in Broadway. I am informed that they are an organized association and that their very interesting game will be played on Saturday next at the above place, to commence at 3:30 p.m. Any person fond of witnessing the game may avail himself to see it played with consummate skill and wonderful dexterity." Well, 2 years later, following the notes appeared in July 13, 1825, in the New York Gazette, the undersigned, all residents of the new town of Hamden, along with the exception of Asa Howland, who has been recently moved into Delhi, challenge an equal number of persons from any town in the county of Delaware to meet them at any time at the house of Edward B. Chase in said town to play the game of baseball for the sum of $1 each per game.
Ooh. I'm going to challenge you.
They challenge you to a duel. No.
Yep. Now, here's a guy, I'm sorry, you'll hear this guy's last name. Thurlow Weed.
I want some weed.
Some weed.
In his memoir, recalled and organized club baseball in Rochester, New York in 1825. Well, the field for the first recorded game of baseball under the later codified rules was played in New York on September 23rd, 1845, between the New York Baseball Club and the Knickerbocker Baseball Club. American baseball was allegedly played in Beachville, Ontario in 1838. However, there's no consensus as to the rules that were used or whether it could be considered the first baseball game. A first-hand account and the rules of the game were recalled by Dr. Adam E. Ford, who had witnessed the game as a 6-year-old boy. In an 1886 issue of the Sporting Life magazine in Denver, Colorado, he described the game in remarkable detail, including the precise distances between the irregular bases and how the ball was constructed. However, some historians, such as David Block, have expressed doubts to the veracity and rather incredible specifically of Ford's memory, and indeed compared it to Abner Gray's very similar yarn about Abner Doubleday. In that letter, Ford refers to old gray hairs at the time who had played this game as children, suggesting the origins of baseball in Canada go back to the 18th century. Very similar instances were recorded by John Montgomery Ward in his 1888 book, Baseball, How to Become a Player, with origins, histories, and explanation of the game, in which he recounts several elderly men having played as boys, covering a span from the 1790s to the 1830s. Among others, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Sr., recalled playing at Harvard, from which he graduated in 1829. Now, that baseball is based on an older English game such as stool ball, trap ball, and tip ball, or tip cat with possible influences cricket, is difficult to dispute. On the other hand, baseball is played as in the New World with many elements that are uniquely American. The earliest published author to muse on the origin of baseball, John Montgomery Ward, was suspicious of the often parroted claim that Rounders is the direct ancestor of baseball, as both were formalized at the same time period. He concluded, with some amount of patriotism, that baseball evolved separately from town ball out of children's safe haven ball games. Now, games played with the bat and ball together may all be distant cousins. Same goes for base and ball games. Bat, base, and ball games for two teams who alternate in and out, such as baseball, cricket, and rounders, are likely to be close cousins. They all involve the throwing the ball to the batsman, who attempts to bat it away and run safely to the base, while the opponent tries to put the batter runner out when liable to be put out in the baseball term for unsafe. Certainly, baseball is related to cricket and rounders, but exactly how or how closely has not been established. The only certain thing is that cricket is much older than baseball, and that cricket was very popular in colonial America in the early United States, fading only with the explosive popularity of New York baseball after the Civil War. Baseball owes to cricket some adopted terminology such as outs, innings, runs, and umpires. There was also wicket, a countrified form of cricket, once popular in New England, which retained the old-fashioned wide, low two-stump wicket in which a large ball was rolled along the ground. Now, the likelihood that baseball and rounders were regional appellations for the same boys' games played with varying rules in many parts of England from the early 1700s onward. Along with the relative stool ball and cat games that crossed the ocean, English colonists eventually followed in its own independent evolutionary path at the same time that back in England was now the generally called rounders was developing separately. Now, when they talk about some of the equipment and stuff going on, numerous 18th and 19th century references in England, and especially America, to a bat and ball. Unfortunately, there is no knowledge or information about the game besides the name, other than it was an alternative term for baseball or something else like trap ball, cat, or even cricket. It might merely just be a generic phrase for any game played with a bat and a ball. However, in 1859, Alfred Ewan recalled a childhood in New Hampshire in the 1810s. The one we call bat and ball may be an imperfect form of cricket, though we played this cricket at the same time, and nearly every man in England which would make it probable that the bat and ball was a game of Yankee invention. Sides are chosen, not limited to any particular number, though seldom more than 6 or 8. The individual first chosen on that side was in, took the bat position at a certain spot. One of his adversaries stood at a given distance from him to throw the ball, and another behind him to catch the ball if it was not struck for the catcher to catch. After the ball was struck, the striker was to run. Stones were placed some 30 or 40 feet apart in a circle.
It's a lot smaller than it is nowadays.
Right.
Nowadays it's 90 feet. This bat and ball at least appears to be one of the earliest, clearly one form of early baseball, round ball, or town ball. Now, we talk about the Knickerbocker team here a little bit, because basically they look at the Knickerbocker team as one of the primary starting points for these teams, because a lot of the teams would be played between them and the New York Nine, and that's where, they talk about the Abner Doubleday myth, and how, supposedly he invented the game, and he was never even in the town of Cooperstown at the time. Interestingly enough, his obituary at the New York Times makes no mention of baseball, nor does a 1911 encyclopedia article about Doubleday.
Well, what do they know?
It's kind of like, and also interestingly enough, contrary to popular belief, Doubleday was never inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Well, that's just rude.
Yeah, no kidding. So Doubleday's invention of baseball was the finding of a panel appointed by Albert Spalding, that same guy that appears on a baseball. What concept?
No.
Former star pitcher and club executive who had become the leading American sports good entrepreneur and sports publisher, and debate on baseball origins had raged for decades, heating up in the first years of the 20th century, due in part to a 1903 essay baseball historian Henry Chadwick wrote on Spalding's official baseball guide, stating that baseball eventually gradually evolved from the English game of rounders. To end the argument, speculation, and innuendo, Spalding organized the Mills Commission in 1905. Now, the members of the baseball figures, not historians, Spalding's friend Abraham G. Mills, a former National League president, 2 United States senators, former National League president Morgan Buckley, and former Washington president Arthur Gordon, former National League president and lifelong secretary Nick Young, 2 other star players turned sporting goods entrepreneurs.
So yeah, basically a bunch of guys that are trying to sell baseballs.
Well, the final report, published December 30th, 1907, included 3 sections: the summary of the panel's findings, written by Mills, a letter by John Montgomery Ward supporting the panel, and a dissenting opinion written by Henry Chadwick. The research methods were, at best, dubious. Mills was a close friend of Doubleday, and upon Doubleday's death in 1893, Mills orchestrated his memorial service and burial. Doubleday had been a prominent member of the Spiritualist Theosophical Society, in which Spalding's wife was deeply involved.
Yeah, basically, I'm going to watch over my friend as much as I can.
Nothing wrong with that.
No.
It's admirable.
Exactly. So, the Mills Commission concluded that Doubleday had invented baseball in Cooperstown in New York in 1839. Doubleday had invented the word baseball, designed the diamonds, indicated fielders' positions, and written the rules. No written records, again, from the decade from 1839 to 1849, were found to corroborate these claims.
They even knew the game baseball from, the 1600s.
Come on now. Now, of course, it's also funny because the ball field built in 1939, known as Doubleday Field, just a few blocks down from Cooperstown at the Hall of Fame. Heaven forbid. But versions of baseball rules and descriptions of similar games have been found in publications that significantly predate this alleged invention in 1839.
No.
Mills' report was not entirely incorrect by its broad outline. A game related to English rounders was played in America from the early times, was supplanted by a variant form which originated in
New York in circa 1840, but this development happened in urban New York City, not in pastoral Cooperstown, and the men involved were neither farm boys nor West Point cadets. Now, the earliest known published rules of baseball in the United States, here we go, written in 1845 for a New York City baseball club called the Knickerbockers. The purported organizer of this club, Alexander Cartwright, is the one person commonly known as the father of baseball. Now the rules themselves were written by a two-man committee on bylaws, Vice President William R. Wheaton and Secretary William H. Tucker. One important rule, the 13th, outlawed soaking or plugging, putting a runner out by hitting him with the thrown ball, introducing instead the concept of the tag, thus reflecting the use of further traveling and potentially injuring hard ball throws. Another significant rule, the 15th, specified 3 outs to each inning for the first time instead of the 1 out, all out, or all out, all out. The 10th rule prescribed foul lines and foul balls. The 18th forbid runners from advancing on a foul, unlike the Massachusetts game where all batted balls were in play. The Knickerbockers also enlarged the diamond well beyond the town ball, possibly to moderate size, depending on how paces are interpreted. Evolution from the so-called Knickerbocker rules to the current rules is fairly well documented. The most significant differences was the overhand pitching was illegal, strikes were only counted if the batter swung and missed, wides or balls were not counted at all, a batted ball caught on the first bounce was an out, and the game was played to 21 aces or runs rather than a set number of innings. It is noted that, however, the Knickerbocker rules did not cover a number of basic elements of the game. For example, there was no mention of positions or the number of players on a side. That's where I was joking earlier. Let's put 30 guys out there. Go ahead and hit it. I want to see somebody's going to catch it.
Somebody.
Or they're going to wind up running into each other.
That could be fun.
Yeah. And it wasn't until 1957 that the number of people on a side was fixed at 9. June 3rd, 1953, Congress officially credited with Cartwright with inventing the modern game. According to Major League Baseball's official historian, John Thorne Cartwright's plaque at the Baseball Hall of Fame declares he set the bases 90 feet apart and established 9 innings in a game and 9 players as a team. He did none of these things, and every other word of substance on his plaque is false. Seems like each side tends to hate each other.
Nobody wants to tell the truth.
No.
I mean, I understand they're having a hard time tracking it down because people didn't write things down back in those days, but now we're just making shit up.
Yeah, we're just going to spin it. Yes, as Wheaton account given in 1887 was correct, and most of the inventions credited to Cartwright were in fact the work of the Gothams before the Knickerbockers were formed, including a set of written rules. John Thorne, Major League Baseball's official historian, argued in his book Baseball in the Garden of Eden that 4 members of the Knickerbockers, namely Wheaton, Lewis F. Wadsworth, Daniel Doc Adams, and William H. Tucker, have stronger claims to than Cartwright as inventor of modern baseball. Legend holds that Cartwright also introduced the game to most of the towns where he stopped on his trek to California to find gold, a sort of Johnny Appleseed of baseball. The story, however, arose from forged entries in Cartwright's diary, which were inserted after his death. Well, it is, however, certain that Cartwright, a New York bookseller who later caught gold fever, did umpire a game in Hoboken, New Jersey on June 19th, 1846. The game ended as the Knickerbocker opponents, the New York 9, would win 23-1.
Ooh.
This is long to believe to be the first recorded U.S. baseball game between organized clubs. Now, like everything else we've been reading, there are a few points. This has long been believed. However, there were at least 3 early reported games that have been discovered. October 10th, 1845, a game played between the New York Ball Club and an unnamed club from Brooklyn at the Union Star Cricket Grounds in Brooklyn.
Well, technically, you could write that one off as unnamed because it said clubs, designated clubs.
Right.
So the other one might not count because there wasn't anybody. There was no name on that one team.
Right. And there were 2 other games on October 21st and 24th. With the first at New York home diamond at Elysian Fields, and then a rematch at the Cricket Star grounds again between the New Yorks and the Brooklyns. But the main thing that's at one point undisputed by historians is that the modern professional major leagues that began in the 1870s developed directly from the amateur urban clubs of the 1840s and 1850s, not from the small towns such as Cooperstown. But that was the one date that they pretty much look at as the start of professional
Because it was
sports
actually
with
kind
the
of
Americans.
documented. There were stories,
Yeah.
but nobody could, what is the word I'm looking for?
Verify.
Yeah, they couldn't
Yeah.
verify. There was no documentation, so they're like, well, yeah, this might have happened,
The
but...
the other 2 aspects from that date that are kind of interesting, because if you think about 1846, not only did you have the guys that when they went off and played at the Civil War, and they had free time, side time, they were playing catch, stuff like that. As people started to expand with the country, going west, small towns started getting small ballparks. They found ways to play games. The thing I always was amazed at was that places like Stoneville had a team, Sulphur had a team, Mud Butte had a team.
I mean, all you need is, what, 18 people?
Yeah, 9 on each side. In fact, what's really funny is out here...
Well, probably closer to 20 because you need a referee, or not a referee, but an umpire and somebody to keep score.
Yeah. What's really funny is when we go to Pier from Rapid, there is a ball field out in the middle of nowhere. Not like Field of Dreams, but this was one that was designed out by Hayes on the way to Pier. And you go, you're like, what is with this ball field out here? Well, apparently, the farmers at the time, if people, were growing wheat, they would advertise that they're looking for farm hands. And sometimes they'd also put in words, hey, if you know how to play baseball, we have an opportunity for you out here too. And they were doing that in the 50s and the 60s. And that field is still in pristine condition to this day. So I imagine they probably still have, folks that come by and play out there in the country too. Still got lights and still got power. But so from this interesting history lesson, you can look at Cartwright as, one of the first key cogs to get the sport going. Because a lot of what he was able to put out, and then after he left the East Coast and started heading for California, because we all know how everybody loves gold.
Gold Rush!
Gold Rush! But he took that history with him, that information, those rules, and it basically gave birth to the, as we now know it, as the American pastime. So, this has been the Bearded Historian for another fun week of baseball history.
Oh.
And we will catch you guys next week.
No, it won't.
No?
No.
Why?
I don't
Oh, Sue's firing me, and so you guys will have to tune in. She's going to take calls next week.
Ooh, what
Yes.
number are they going to call?
1-800 Squish Bob. Bye
Good
bye,
night.
folks.